if I am not even really gay?
You couldn't be any gayer if your name was Gay Gayerson.
Have you ever laughed at a character without knowing their real story? For decades, queer sitcom characters were jokes, secrets, or deleted lines. Now we're flipping the script. Here are 11 beloved sitcom characters you didn't know were gay. 1. Steve from All in the Family.
He thinks that you're the... I can't even say it, you Steve.
He's right, Arch.
Huh?
Let's start at the beginning with a true pioneer. On February 9th, 1971, in just the 5th episode of a new show called All in the Family, a man named Steve walked into the Bunker family's living room and changed TV forever. The surprise about Steve is just how important he was. He was the very first gay character on an American sitcom who was shown as a normal, likable guy. Back then, gay men on TV were either totally invisible or they were shown as creepy villains or silly, weak caricatures. Steve was none of those things. He was a brave first step. The man behind All in the Family, a genius producer named Norman Lear, wanted to use comedy to challenge people's prejudices. The whole episode, judging books by covers, was a clever trap for people's stereotypes. The show's main character, the bigot Archie Bunker, spends the whole episode making fun of his son-in-law's friend, Roger, because he thinks Roger acts gay. But the big punchline is that Roger is straight. It's Archie's own friend, Steve, a tough, masculine ex-football player who is actually gay. This twist was designed to blow up the audience's ideas about what a gay man was supposed to be like. Steve's character was built to break stereotypes. He was confident and masculine. When Archie finds out he's gay and can't believe it, Steve just calmly says that yes, he's a homosexual. He wasn't ashamed or sorry. The episode ends with Archie, totally confused, challenging Steve to another arm wrestling match. Seeing these two manly guys locked in a test of strength right after this big reveal was a powerful image. Steve wasn't a joke. He was the lesson. You can't overstate how huge this was. This was less than 2 years after the Stonewall riots, a major event in the fight for gay rights. At the time, being gay was still wrongly listed as a mental illness. And yet, Norman Lear put a normal, cool gay guy on primetime TV and made his most famous bigoted character grudgingly respect him. This one episode started a national conversation and showed that sitcoms could talk about serious issues. Every gay character that came after him owes something to Steve. He was the first crack in the closet door on television. 2. Jody Dallas from Soap.
Alexander the Great was gay. Plato was gay.
Plato? Mickey Mouse's dog was gay?
In 1977, a wild and crazy show called Soap hit the airwaves. It was a parody of daytime soap operas, and it was full of shocking storylines. But the most revolutionary thing about it was one of its main characters, Jody Dallas, played by the hilarious Billy Crystal. What's so surprising about Jody? He was the first openly gay main character to be a regular part of a weekly American TV series. Before Jody, gay characters were usually just one-time guests. Jody was there every single week, a central part of the family. The show's creator, Susan Harris, wanted to push every boundary she could. Jody's character was at the center of some of the show's most controversial and talked about plots. He wanted to have a sex change operation, which was a huge deal to talk about on TV in the 70s. He had a relationship with a professional football player, and he even ended up raising a daughter. This was not the kind of stuff you saw on Happy Days. The show was so controversial that religious groups protested it before it even aired. Jody was a really complicated character. On one hand, his story was groundbreaking. It showed a gay man dealing with love, family, and wanting to be a parent. It treated his desires as real and important. On the other hand, looking back now, his character was also full of stereotypes. He was often shown as being confused, emotionally unstable, and his storylines were sometimes played for shock value instead of for real human emotion. He was a huge step forward, but he was also a product of his time when writers were still figuring out how to tell gay stories without falling back on old cliches. Jody Dallas's legacy is that he kicked the door wide open. After him, it became possible for shows to have gay characters as part of their main cast. He proved that an audience would tune in every week to follow the story of an openly gay man. While the portrayal might seem a bit clumsy or stereotypical to us today, in 1977 it was an act of pure bravery. He was the first gay character who wasn't just visiting, he was home. 3. Beverly LaSalle from All in the Family.
She's a lovely big girl.
I always like gals with little meat in their bones.
Rummage around there, you find a lot more.
Norman Lear and All in the Family weren't done changing television after the episode with Steve. A few years later, in 1975, they introduced Beverly LaSalle. Played by a real-life drag performer named Laurie Shannon, Beverly was a female impersonator, that's the phrase they used back then, who became a friend of the Bunker family. The surprise of Beverly isn't just that a drag queen was a recurring character on TV in the 70s, but the incredibly deep and tragic story she was given. Her story went from being a joke to a real friendship, and then to a heartbreaking end that forced the show to deal with violence and hate in a way no sitcom ever had before. Beverly first showed up in an episode where Archie saves her life with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, only to freak out when he finds out she's a man. This was a classic sitcom setup, with the humor coming from Archie's panic. But Beverly came back. She formed a genuine friendship with Archie's kind-hearted wife, Edith. She was no longer just a punchline. She was a real, warm, and witty person. Then, in 1977, the show did something shocking. In a 2-part episode, Beverly tragically lost her life in a violent, hateful attack. This was an incredibly dark turn for a comedy show, but it was a deliberate choice to show the real-world violence that queer people faced. Beverly's story shows how complex Norman Lear's vision was. She started as a problem for Archie to deal with, but she became a beloved friend. Because the audience had come to care about her, her loss was a real gut punch. The story then focused on Edith. Edith's simple, strong Christian faith was completely shattered. She couldn't understand how a loving God could let such a hateful, cruel thing happen to her friend. This was one of the most serious and honest looks at faith and grief ever shown on TV. Even Archie, who was so prejudiced at the beginning, was truly shaken by her tragic end. Beverly LaSalle is a painful but very important part of queer TV history. She was one of the first positive portrayals of a gender non-conforming person on TV. Her story showed that a sitcom could talk about the darkest parts of homophobia. Even though her death is a sad example of a harmful TV trope where queer characters often meet tragic ends, the show treated her life and her tragic end with so much seriousness. For its time, that was a revolutionary act that gave value and dignity to a queer life. 4. Joe Polnicek from The Facts of Life.
I know a phony when I see one.
You should. You spend enough time looking in the mirror.
In 1980, a tough girl named Joanna Jo Polnicek roared onto the set of the sitcom The Facts of Life on a motorcycle, and the show was never the same. Played by Nancy McKeon, Jo was a street-smart tomboy from the Bronx. She was the complete opposite of her preppy, rich, and super feminine rival, Blair Warner. For a whole generation of kids, especially young queer women, Jo wasn't just a funny character, she was a hero. The surprise of Jo is that she might be the most famous coded lesbian icon in TV history. The show never said she was gay, but it dropped so many hints that for millions of fans, it became an undeniable truth. So how did this happen? Well, after the first season of The Facts of Life, the show needed a shakeup. The writers reportedly wanted to add an openly gay character, but the TV network in the 1980s was way too scared to ever allow that. So, the writers used the powerful tool of subtext, or hidden meaning. They gave Jo a bunch of traits that, together, created a strong queer vibe. She had an androgynous style short hair, leather jackets, jeans, she was good with tools, she wasn't interested in makeup or fancy clothes, and most importantly, she had a super intense relationship with the very feminine Blair. The friendship between Jo and Blair is the key to her being a queer icon. Their relationship was a perfect example of the enemies to lovers story that is super popular in queer fiction. They were always bickering and fighting, but underneath it all, they were fiercely loyal to each other. Their emotional connection was often much deeper than any of the relationships they had with boys. There were tons of moments fans pointed to as being secretly romantic. Jo wasn't really interested in the boys the other girls were chasing. The show would give her a boyfriend every now and then, but those relationships always felt way less important than the electric connection she had with Blair. Jo's legacy shows just how powerful secret messages can be, especially when open representation isn't allowed. For countless young people in the 1980s who were trying to figure out who they were, Jo was a mirror. She showed them a different way to be a girl, a way that was tough, independent, and cool. The fact that her queerness was never spoken out loud didn't make it less powerful. In a way, it made it even more special. It created a secret understanding between the show and its queer fans. Jo is a perfect example of how, when you can't be out and proud, a coded hero can be a lifeline. 5. Leon Karp from Roseanne.
What if I am not even really gay?
You couldn't be any gayer if your name was Gay Gayerson.
For most of his time on the show Roseanne, Leon Karp, played by Martin Mull, was the fussy, uptight, and always annoyed boss at the diner where Roseanne worked. The surprise about Leon is actually twofold. First, just the fact that he existed was a big deal. He was a recurring gay character on a huge network sitcom in the early 1990s, and he was much more than just a one-note joke. Second, and even more surprising when you look back, is how pioneering his stories were. In 1995, he had a wedding with his partner, Scott. This was the first time a recurring character had a same-sex wedding on American network TV. It even happened before the more famous lesbian wedding on Friends. Leon was on the show because the star, Roseanne Barr, wanted her sitcom to look like real life, and she had a gay brother and sister. Leon's identity was revealed in a very casual way. His boyfriend just picked him up from work one day. It was treated as a simple fact about him. The wedding episode, December Bride, was so groundbreaking that the network, ABC, got nervous. They moved the episode to a later time slot and refused to let Leon and Scott actually kiss on screen. After the episode, Roseanne and one of the writers even pitched a new spin-off show about Leon and Scott raising a teenage daughter. But ABC said no. They didn't think America was ready for a show with a gay couple as the main characters. Leon's character was brilliant because he smashed stereotypes. In the wedding episode, he gets nervous and tries to convince himself he can't be gay because he's a Republican and he doesn't like Barbra Streisand, making fun of the idea that all gay men are the same. Roseanne's simple reply, "But you like men, right? Gay?" was a hilarious way to cut through all the nonsense. He also had a real friendship with Roseanne that wasn't the tired old gay best friend trope. They were just two people who annoyed each other, but also respected each other. By being a gay Republican, Leon forced audiences to see that you can't put people in neat little boxes. His wedding broke new ground for television. He showed that a gay character could be complicated, funny, and a full part of a show's world. His sexuality was just one part of who he was, and that was a powerful message. 6. Carol Willick and Susan Bunch from Friends.
My way? You think this is my way? Believe me, of all the ways I ever imagined this moment in my life being, this is not my way. You know what? This is too hard. I can't do it.
Knock. How are we today? Any nausea?
A little.
Yeah, just a little.
Almost everyone who watched TV in the 1990s remembers Carol Willick and Susan Bunch from Friends. They were Ross Geller's ex-wife and her new partner. The surprise about them isn't that they were on the show, but how complicated their legacy is. On one hand, they were a huge deal for television. The LGBTQ+ advocacy group, GLAAD, praised them as a positive example of a gay couple. Their wedding episode, the one with the lesbian wedding, was one of the first of its kind and was a major TV event. On the other hand, if you watch the show today, you'll see that their relationship was often the setup for a constant stream of jokes rooted in prejudice, and their story was almost always told from Ross's point of view. The show's creators were very nervous about their story. The role of Carol was even recast after the first time she appeared. When it was time for their wedding episode, the network wouldn't let Carol and Susan share a kiss on screen, which was a huge double standard compared to all the straight couples on the show. But the producers did something clever. They cast Candace Gingrich, a famous gay rights activist whose brother was the powerful conservative politician Newt Gingrich, to be the person who officiates the wedding. Even though some TV stations in the country refused to air the episode, it was a massive ratings hit. Over 31 million people watched it, which showed that the public was more ready for it than the networks thought. Looking back, Carol and Susan are a great example of how early representation could be both good and bad. They were amazing because they normalized the idea of a lesbian family for a giant worldwide audience. They showed millions of people that two women could raise a child together and have a happy life. But this progress came with a price. The show was always focused on Ross's feelings. His discomfort and his pain were the main story. A lot of the jokes were at their expense, relying on lazy stereotypes about lesbians. Their own relationship was rarely shown to be romantic or affectionate, but Ross and Carol actually kissed long after they were divorced. This made them feel like side characters in a straight guy's story about his ex-wife, instead of the main characters of their own lives. Carol and Susan were true pioneers. They brought a lesbian family into living rooms everywhere and proved it could be a success. For a lot of young queer people watching at the time, they were a sign that a happy life with a family was possible. But their story is also a warning about how representation can be tricky. When a queer story is told mainly through the eyes of straight characters, it can end up reinforcing some of the same stereotypes it's trying to fight. They were a complicated but very important chapter in the story of queer characters on TV. 7. Ellen Morgan from Ellen.
What do you think? Should I smile or not smile? Let me see you smile. Yeah, you've seen my smile before. I need to see it again. Don't smile. Jeez.
There are important TV moments, and then there are moments that change the world. The coming out of Ellen Morgan, the quirky bookstore owner played by Ellen DeGeneres on her sitcom Ellen, was one of those world-changing moments. What's so surprising about this story isn't just that the character came out as gay in 1997. It was the brave and unprecedented way that Ellen DeGeneres decided to have her character come out at the exact same time she came out in real life. It was a massive public act of honesty that carried huge risks for her career and her personal life. By 1996, Ellen DeGeneres was tired of hiding who she was. She was also tired of her character on the show having boring and pointless dating storylines with men. So, she and the show's writers came up with a bold plan. They would both come out together. This wasn't just a secret they kept until the show aired. They turned it into a massive media event. Weeks before the episode, Ellen appeared on the cover of Time magazine with the simple, iconic headline, "Yep, I'm gay." She then did a very open and honest interview with Oprah Winfrey. All of this built huge anticipation for the TV episode. The episode itself was given the secret code name, the Puppy Episode, to keep the plot from leaking. It was a huge, star-studded event, with Laura Dern playing the woman Ellen's character falls for, and Oprah Winfrey playing her therapist. The most famous moment comes when Ellen is trying to tell Laura Dern's character her big secret, and she accidentally blurts out, "I'm gay," over an airport PA system for everyone to hear. It was a perfect TV moment, mixing hilarious comedy with a feeling of pure, emotional freedom. Ellen Morgan's coming out was the ultimate example of breaking the fourth wall. The audience wasn't just watching a character's story, they were watching a real person become free, and she was doing it through her character. The backlash was immediate and intense. Some local ABC TV stations refused to air the episode. Big companies like JCPenney and Chrysler pulled their ads. The studio even received serious threats. After the episode aired to a giant audience of 42 million people, the show's ratings started to decline. ABC put a parental advisory warning before new episodes, and some people criticized the show for becoming too gay. It was canceled a year later. Even with all that backlash, what Ellen DeGeneres did fundamentally changed the world. The puppy episode shattered the glass ceiling for queer people on TV. It proved that the main character of a network sitcom could be openly gay. Her bravery paved the direct path for shows like Will and Grace, which started the year Ellen was canceled, and for every other major queer character that has followed since. In 2016, President Barack Obama gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. He said that her courage helped push our country in the direction of justice. Ellen Morgan's story is number one on this list because it's the ultimate example of how TV can be a powerful force for change. It was a moment when a sitcom character didn't just entertain us. She helped bend the arc of history toward a better, more accepting future. 8. Will Truman and Jack McFarland from Will and Grace.
Okay, FYI, folks, most people that meet me do not know that I am gay.
Jack, blind and deaf people know you're gay.
After Ellen Morgan kicked the closet door off its hinges, Will Truman and Jack McFarland walked right through it and into America's living rooms. The show Will and Grace, which premiered in 1998, was the first truly successful network sitcom with openly gay men as its main characters. Will, played by Eric McCormick, was a handsome, successful lawyer. His best friend, Jack, played by Sean Hayes, was a flamboyant, out-of-work actor. Together with their best friends Grace and Karen, they formed a new kind of TV family. The surprise here was just how normal and mainstream the show made gay life seem to a huge audience, all while being incredibly funny. The show was a game changer. It took the idea of a gay main character and multiplied it by 2, showing 2 very different kinds of gay men. Will was more straight-laced and responsible, often acting as the straight man in the comedy duo. Jack, on the other hand, was the living embodiment of every flamboyant stereotype, but he was played with so much joy and confidence that he became an icon. The show's humor came from their personalities and their hilarious interactions with Grace and Karen, not just from jokes about them being gay. For 8 seasons, Will and Grace was a cultural phenomenon. It was one of the first times many Americans felt like they had gay friends, even if they were on TV. The show was not without its critics. Some people felt that it didn't deal with serious LGBTQ+ issues enough, and that it relied too much on stereotypes, especially with the character of Jack. But the creators' goal was to make a funny show first and foremost, believing that normalization through comedy was its own form of activism. The show's impact is undeniable. It won 18 Emmy Awards and was one of the most popular comedies of its time. Its legacy was so powerful that even Vice President Joe Biden said in 2012 that Will and Grace probably did more to educate the American public on LGBTQ+ issues than almost anything anybody has ever done. It took the brave step Ellen made and turned it into a long-running, beloved, and hilarious institution. Will and Jack proved that gay characters weren't just for a very special episode. They could be the stars of the show week after week. 9. Patty Bouvier from The Simpsons.
Her name's Veronica. But Veronica's a girl's name. Did you know that? I'm marrying a woman. I'm gay.
For 16 long seasons on The Simpsons, we all thought we knew Patty Bouvier. Voiced by Julie Kavner, she was one half of the miserable, chain-smoking twin sisters of Marge Simpson. She and her sister Selma were defined by their gravelly voices, their obsession with the TV show MacGyver, and their strong dislike for Homer. Patty always seemed destined to be a lonely spinster. But in 2005, the show dropped a huge surprise. In the episode, There's Something About Marrying, this character we had known for almost 2 decades came out as a lesbian. This wasn't just a small character update. It was a bold and funny statement right in the middle of a huge real-world political fight over same-sex marriage. The writers had actually been dropping little hints about Patty's sexuality for years. But the decision to have her officially come out was a direct response to what was happening in the country at the time. The episode's story, where the town of Springfield legalizes same-sex marriage just to make money from tourism, was a clever way to make fun of the whole debate. The show even ran a huge publicity campaign before the episode aired, with people placing bets on which character would be revealed as gay. The episode was a brilliant piece of social commentary. The most clever part was how it flipped the roles of the Simpson family. Marge, who had always been the tolerant and open-minded one, has a really hard time accepting that her own sister is gay. Meanwhile, Homer, who had a whole classic episode dedicated to his prejudices, Homer's Phobia, is suddenly all for gay marriage because he sees a chance to make money by becoming a wedding officiant. This was a smart way to poke fun at how people's tolerance can change when it affects them personally. The big moment comes when Patty is about to marry a woman who turns out to be a man in disguise. Patty finds out and yells, "Hell no, I like girls." It's a powerful and proud declaration of who she is. Patty's coming out was a major TV event. It used the massive popularity of The Simpsons to put the gay marriage debate into living rooms all across America. Of course, some conservative groups were outraged, but many people praised the show for being so bold. By making a character that everyone already knew and loved the center of this story, the show made a political issue feel personal. It permanently changed Patty's character, turning her from a one-note joke into one of the most famous and long-running lesbian characters in TV history. 10. Waylon Smithers from The Simpsons.
They do have an excellent LGBT policy.
What's that stand for? Lazy goof-off buffoons? And transgender?
For almost 30 years, Waylon Smithers was the most obvious secret in all of television. As Mr. Burns' loyal, bootlicking, and completely devoted assistant on The Simpsons, his unrequited love for his evil elderly boss was one of the show's longest-running jokes. The surprise about Smithers isn't that he was gay. Everyone knew that. But the story of his incredibly long 27-year journey from being a secret joke to becoming an openly gay man. His character's evolution perfectly mirrors how our whole society has slowly, sometimes awkwardly, and finally, with real heart, moved toward accepting LGBTQ+ people. The idea for Smithers to be gay came from one of the original showrunners, but the plan was to never make a big deal about it. For years, this led to a lot of winking and nudging jokes. We saw Smithers have a fantasy about a scantily clad Mr. Burns popping out of a birthday cake, and his computer screensaver was a picture of Burns saying, "You're quite good at turning me on." But it was always just a joke. The big change came in 2016 with an episode called The Burns Cage. The writer of that episode, Rob Lazebnik, had a very personal reason for writing it. He wanted to write the episode as a way of showing his own gay son that he loved and supported him. This personal motivation turned a decades-old gag into a truly emotional and sincere moment. The Burns Cage finally made the secret official. In the episode, after Mr. Burns rejects him yet again, Smithers is heartbroken. Homer, in a rare moment of compassion, decides to help Smithers find a boyfriend. Smithers actually falls for a man named Julio, and even quits his job to be with him. For the first time, we see him looking for happiness for himself, not just trying to please Mr. Burns. In the end, he does go back to work for Burns, but things are different. Mr. Burns finally shows him some respect. Smithers' story is like a tiny history of gay rights on TV. He started as a coded character back when that was the only way to be gay on television. He lived through decades of being a punchline, and he finally came out in an era where his identity could be explored with real emotion. The fact that his official coming out was inspired by a father's love for his son is a beautiful full-circle moment for the character. He went from being a joke to being a symbol of real human connection. 11th, Kurt Hummel from Glee.
Fine. You want to hit me? You want to beat me up? Go ahead. But I swear to you, I will never change. I'm proud to be different.
While the show Glee was more of a musical dramedy than a pure sitcom, the story of Kurt Hummel, played by Chris Colfer, had a massive impact on millions of young viewers and deserves a spot on this list. Kurt was a high school student in small-town Ohio who was fashionable, had a pitch-perfect soprano voice, and was openly and proudly gay from the very beginning of the show. The surprise of Kurt wasn't his sexuality, but the incredible depth and realism with which the show portrayed his journey. For many young queer kids watching at home, Kurt's story was the first time they saw their own struggles, fears, and triumphs reflected on screen. Kurt's journey was central to the show's first few seasons. He dealt with intense bullying from the jocks at his school, most notably the closeted football player Dave Karofsky. The show didn't shy away from showing the real-world terror of violence fueled by prejudice, a storyline that was both heartbreaking and incredibly important. But Kurt's story was also full of joy. His relationship with his father, Bert Hummel, was one of the most beautiful portrayals of a parent's unconditional love for their gay child ever shown on television. The scene where Bert defends Kurt against his new stepbrother Finn's prejudiced language is a powerful, tear-jerking classic. What made Kurt so special was his resilience. Despite the bullying, he never hid who he was. He expressed himself through his fabulous fashion and his stunning musical performances. His relationship with Blaine Anderson, another openly gay student from a rival school, became one of the show's most beloved pairings, Klaine. Their love story was a beacon of hope for young viewers, showing them that a happy, romantic future was possible. Kurt Hummel became a cultural icon. Chris Colfer won a Golden Globe for his performance, and the character was praised by critics and fans alike for providing a nuanced, positive, and deeply necessary role model. In a media landscape that had often ignored or made fun of gay teens, Kurt was a hero. He was brave, talented, and unapologetically himself. He showed a generation of kids that it was okay to be different, and that the things that make you different are also the things that make you special.